Hello, my name is Tyler Mintzer, and I am a graduate student at North Carolina State University's Masters of Arts in Teaching program, and I'm studying to become a middle grades English language arts teacher. Today I'm going to be presenting a webinar about the book Teaching Reading to Black Adolescent Males, Closing the Achievement Gap by Dr. Alfred Tatum. The central premise of the book is to provide educators with a resource for pedagogically sound instructional strategies to use in classrooms in order to reconceptualize the role of literacy for Black male students in order to ensure they are offered the best literacy instruction possible. In order to achieve this, educators must also understand the contributing factors that impact African American males' attitudes towards self, school, community, and society. Literacy development is crucial to closing the racial achievement gap, but the current educational environment on epistemological and institutional levels does not necessarily support African American male learning. Therefore, educators must provide opportunities for student success by using relevant reading and writing experiences that reflect the issues of young African American males. Dr. Tatum examines how the historical, cultural, and social impact of slavery influences the turmoil experienced by young Black males in modern society. This is reflected in the effects of globalization, urban economic neglect, mass media and popular culture, public policy regarding criminal justice, persistence of racial discrimination, the crumbling Black community infrastructure, and lack of fulfillment of civil rights promises. He also invites educators to consider various factors when planning effective literacy instruction for Black males, because they have the potential to interrupt literacy development. These are the roots of Black male turmoil, the Black male's response to this turmoil, the ways institutions have responded to Black male turmoil, and how this turmoil affects Black males' literacy development. Dr. Tatum outlines 4 different literacies that educators need to consider when developing lesson plan and instruction to promote young African American male students' literacy development. These are academic, which are skills and strategies that can be applied independently to handle cognitively demanding tasks, cultural, which is a consciousness of historical and current events that shape one's cultural identity as an African American, knowledge of the rich and storied history of African Americans and what this means in present-day situations. Emotional, which is the ability to manage one's feelings and beliefs. And finally, social, which is the ability to navigate a variety of settings and be able to communicate in a variety of ways to achieve positive outcomes. In order to meet the goals of this instructional framework, there are 3 different levels. The first are the theoretical strands. That involves prior knowledge background activation, as well as creating learning objectives that are culturally responsive. The second level involves instructional strands. This is the implementation of lesson plan and learning objectives into the classroom, being what is the text selection, how to frame instructional strategies that are relevant to student experiences, and then what assessment profiles will you use to evaluate student work. The third level are the professional development strands. This involves professional learning communities where teachers are able to collaborate with one another about the methods, strategies, and learning objectives that are successful when teaching young African American male students. The ability for educators to empower students through the curriculum is an important dimension in developing relevant literacy instruction and education. Dr. Tatum cites Linda Darling Hammond's study in 1998, and some of the main premises of that study are to engage students with text and discussions about the real issues that young Black male students, their families, and their communities face. Also, addressing the students' cognitive and affective domains that take into account students' culture. And finally, connecting the social, the economic, and the political to the educational. In order to achieve this, educators need to find a balance between mandated or assigned texts and must-read texts, which students are going to be naturally more drawn towards because they're appealing. Mandated texts are neutral and intended for all students, They focus on consensus so that all students can think about the text in the same way, and they ignore racism, classism, and sexism. Must-read text, on the other hand, treats reality as something to be questioned and analyzed. It focuses on Black male visibility, and it's guided by a vision of economic, political, and social justice. They also provide new knowledge and direction. One of the instructional strategies that Dr. Tatum proposes and that he used with his own students when he was an educator in the classroom was the fluky flan text. The idea behind this activity is to build reading confidence in students by using contextual cues. The activity is started by reading a short passage out loud to students in the classroom. Flunky Flan flubbed and flanned without fubbing. He slipped on a blute and broke his sark. He was rushed to a hod and a sneed that ran every red light. Fluky Flan no longer flubs or flans due to his binny. In this example, there is a lot of made-up vocabulary, and the idea is to get students to think about how they can use context clues in order to build their understanding about a narrative. The teacher then engages in an all-class discussion, asking them about the story itself. Who is the text about? What was Fluky doing? What did he slip on? What does he no longer flub or flan? Notice that the questions are intended to get students to use evidence directly from the text, even with the nonsense language. Then, students are invited to rewrite the text in their own words. Students use what they already know based on the contextual cues within the text to recreate the narrative so that it makes sense. This is designed to help build reader confidence by relying on graphophonics, or visual cues, and the ability to decode the text. Syntax, or the structural cues, and the way the words are positioned within the text. Semantics, or meaning cues, and finally, schema, the background knowledge they bring to the text based on their own experiences and prior knowledge activation. Another strategy that Dr. Tatum used with his students when he was a teacher in the classroom is the paired repeated reading evaluation. At the beginning of each week, he would choose a brief text, only 50 to 200 words, and provide copies of it to each student. Then, he would model how to read the text out loud. It's important to note that the texts were selected appropriate for the grade level and not necessarily the students' reading ability levels. This activity is intended to be a challenge. After reading it out loud, students would get into pairs and would take turns reading it out loud to each other. After each reading, there is a self-evaluation process where each student thinks about the way that they read the passage to the other student. The listening partner is also responsible for providing the reader with feedback. They score them based on how well and how smoothly they read the passage, whether or not it was with expression, whether or not their partner was able to work through some of the more challenging words, and whether or not they stopped for punctuation. They do this for the second and third time that their partner reads through the text to see if there is improvement. Dr. Tatum used this strategy with his students as a way to practice for a reading out loud assessment that would take place at the end of the week. It's also important to remember that when selecting the text for this reading out loud practice, that they need to be multicultural texts that are cognitively challenging and also promote vocabulary study. That is, students should be challenged by the text and work towards proficiency. What I found most useful about Dr. Tatum's book is the fact that he raises an awareness of the issues that young African American male students are facing in middle school, especially when identity formation is at the forefront of their development. He challenges us to embrace a culturally responsive curriculum in order to meet the needs of the most disadvantaged and marginalized population of students in public education in the United States. I highly recommend this book because it provides educators with strategies and resources on how to invite students to grow in their literacy development while maintaining high academic expectations.